What if Earth was never sanctuary but farm, not a garden tended by a benevolent hand, but a cage whose bars are made of light, whose pastures are watered not with rain, but with human sorrow? We were told the world was given to us, that it was a stage for salvation. Every struggle and every tear would one day be redeemed. But what if the opposite is true? What if every prayer, every heartbreak, every sacrifice has been feeding something unseen farmers who harvest not flesh but spirit? Imagine your joy distilled into nectar, your grief fermented into wine, your hope siphoned like blood into chalices raised by invisible hands. Wars become ritual slaughterhouses. Cathedrals become processing centers. Funerals and weddings alike become ceremonies that channel energy upward. From the cradle to the grave, from baptism to confession, from oath to last breath, every moment is ritual. Every ritual is transaction. And when you die, they say a light will greet you, a tunnel, a warm embrace, a reunion with all you have lost. But what if that tunnel is not gateway but chute, not ascension but recycling? What if the afterlife is not freedom but the final harvest? The moment when the last drop of your essence is collected before you are cast back, emptied and reset into the cycle again? Voices long suppressed have whispered this. Priests who broke vows, mystics who cracked the code, experiencers who returned from the edge and saw the trap. They all tell the same forbidden truth. Earth is not sanctuary, but system. A farm of souls bound by symbols, drained by rituals, recycled by light. The question is not whether you are being harvested or... The question is, can you ever stop feeding them? To call Earth a farm is not poetry, but architecture. A system so complete, so seamless, that it hides itself behind the illusion of freedom. From the moment you enter this world, you are woven into its design. Born through pain, nurtured through ritual, bound by symbols, and harvested at death. The evil here is not in a single demon, a tyrant, or a cult. It is in the system itself, a biospiritual architecture that extends from womb to tomb, written in the very structures of religion, culture, and afterlife itself. Architecture begins with birth. A child's first breath is marked by pain, the mother's agony, the infant's cry. This moment is framed as miracle, but in the farm, it is initiation, the first act of harvest. Suffering becomes the template, encoded as natural. From here, the architecture guides every stage. Child is given a name, a legal mark that ties identity to the system. The name is not innocent, it is contract, a signature binding you into the ledger of the farm. As you grow, you are conditioned through rituals disguised as ordinary life. Baptisms, schooling, pledges of allegiance, religious instructional are initiation ceremonies. You kneel, you repeat, you obey. Each repetition reinforces the architecture, training you to feed energy upward without ever realizing it. Pain becomes discipline. Obedience becomes virtue. Joy becomes reward for compliance. The farm does not need chains. It builds cages in the mind. Religion functions as the central chamber of this architecture. Cathedrals, temples, mosques all act as energy processors. The architecture is precise, high ceilings to amplify chants, stained glass to refract light, organs and drums to vibrate the body. These are not accidental aesthetics, they are technologies of harvest. Worshippers gather, emotions surge, voices rise, and the current flows upward. The faithful believe they are sending love to heaven, but in truth, they are fueling a machinery older and colder than any creed. Suffering is engineered as the farm's richest crop. Wars erupt not only for territory, but for blood spilled in ritual sacrifice. Every battlefield is altar, every trench a channel of anguish. Hospitals overflow with grief, funerals, processions with tears, disasters with screams. The architecture thrives on extremes of emotion, feeding not on flesh but on vibration. Pain, ecstasy, devotion, despair all are harvested equally. You are taught that suffering ennobles, that sacrifice sanctifies. In reality, it energizes the system. The afterlife is the final chamber, the harvest mechanism perfected. Experiencers speak of tunnels of light, reunions with loved ones, voices of guides. But when read through the architecture of evil, This is containment protocol. The tunnel is not doorway but chute. The reunion, a hologram. A life review, a manipulation of guilt. Souls are persuaded, comforted, shamed into agreement. Step into the light, re-enter the cycle, feed again. Those who refuse the tunnel describe wandering, resistance, silence. Few are strong enough to break free. Most return, recycled into flesh, bound again to the farm. The system ensures continuity through contracts invisible but binding. Every prayer, every vow, every confession is consent. By believing, you agree. By worshiping, you bind. By obeying, you sign. The architecture of evil does not force, it persuades. It offers comfort in exchange for compliance, hope in exchange for harvest. That is why it survives. Open coercion breeds rebellion. Illusion breeds consent. The farm thrives not because you are trapped, but because you are convinced you are free. Even culture outside religion repeats the design. National anthems, political rallies, sports stadiums all mimic liturgy. Flags wave like banners of faith. Chants rise like hymns. Collective ecstasy surges like revival. Governments extract devotion as surely as churches extract prayer. Corporations build temples of commerce where logos replace crosses. Jingles replace hymns. Products replace sacraments. The farm does not care whether you kneel to altar, flag, or brand. All feed the same architecture. The genius of this system is its invisibility. Evil is usually imagined as monstrous, obvious, dripping with malice. But the architecture of evil cloaks itself in beauty. Sunlit stained glass, inspiring anthems, moments of love at weddings and funerals all seem sacred, human, meaningful. Yet each channels emotion, feeding currents upward. The farm does not harvest only pain. It harvests devotion, joy, hope. To the system, love is as valuable as grief. What matters is intensity, not morality. This is why Salvador Frio's testimony as a Jesuit was so dangerous. He described Earth as a biospiritual farm, not metaphorically, but architecturally. To him, every religion, every ritual, every afterlife promise was not salvation, but infrastructure. Freo saw the structure, and for this, he was cast out. Institutions cannot allow the architecture to be named, because once named, it becomes visible. Its power weakens. The architecture of evil is not new. It predates nations, predates creeds, predates memory. It is why myths of gods demanding sacrifice appear in every culture. Why temples and pyramids align to stars. Why blood has been shed in the name of heaven for millennia. Because the farm is not local, it is planetary. Earth itself was designed as containment field, temple disguised as world. And so we return to the unsettling truth. You are inside the architecture, whether you believe or not. Every tear, every prayer, every anthem fuels it. The only question is whether you will continue to feed it blindly or awaken to its design, because the farm has no doors, no fences, no visible overseers. It is only rituals, contracts, and illusions. And its greatest triumph is this: to convince the herd they are free, while their essence is harvested in silence. The architecture of the farm is invisible because it is built not from stone or iron, but from symbols. From birth to death, from worship to afterlife, you are surrounded by signs that seem harmless, sacred, or even comforting. Yet every one of them functions as a piece of machinery, an encoded instruction, a channel for energy. Symbols are the grammar of the system, and once you learn to read them, you begin to see the farm for what it is. Not sanctuary, but circuit. Take the most familiar, the cross. To the faithful, it is a symbol of salvation, suffering transformed into redemption. But to the system, it is a battery. Every crucifix displayed, every prayer uttered beneath its shadow, channels grief and hope into the architecture. The symbol itself is neutral, but once bound to ritual, it becomes functional. Every glance, every kiss upon the wood is not devotion, it is transaction. You give energy, and the symbol transmits it. The same is true of the circle of light described in near-death experiences. To those who pass, it appears as a gateway, radiant with love. But if read as symbol, it is a sigil of containment. The tunnel guides the soul, as a funnel guides cattle. Narrowing options until only one remains. Step through, return, recycle. The symbol comforts even as it binds, a perfect tool of harvest disguised as embrace. Consider funerals. Candles flicker in rows, bells toll, mourners chant in unison. These are not accidental choices, they are symbolic technologies. The flame is a microcosm of the eternal fire, drawing souls toward it. The bell is vibration ringing through the body like tuning fork, shifting consciousness. The chant is repetition, programming grief into rhythm. Each element is symbol, each symbol is function. Together they form a ceremony that converts sorrow into usable energy. Every culture employs the same symbolic machinery. In Hindu tradition, the sacred syllable Om vibrates as sound symbol, opening inner channels. In Islam, the crescent moon rises above minarets, shaping worshippers' gaze upward. In Catholicism, the rosary beads guide repetition, each bead a marker of consent. In secular society, the flag waves above stadiums, geometric lines and colors, binding millions to collective identity. The corporation's logo flashes on glowing screen, recognized instantly, triggering devotion as deep as any creed. These are not just decorations, they are sigils of the farm. Symbols work because they bypass reason, may not understand why a logo attracts you, why a hymn moves you, why a tunnel of light feels safe. But the effect is undeniable. Symbols are shortcuts into the unconscious, reaching places no sermon or law can touch. They activate archetypes older than memory, stirring responses wired into the psyche. That is why the Watchers in Enoch taught humanity, astrology, enchantments, ornamentation. They did not merely offer tools, they offered symbolic technologies. To read the stars as map, to inscribe the body with paint. To repeat words as spell, these are ways to bind the human mind into ritual circuitry. The danger lies in mistaking symbols for truth. Once you accept the cross as salvation, the flag as destiny, the tunnel as heaven, you surrender energy willingly. You kneel, not knowing you are feeding. The farm thrives on this blindness. The symbols do not hide, they stand everywhere, glowing above churches, waving on buildings, glowing on screens. Their power is precisely in their visibility. The herd walks among them without suspicion, never realizing they are walking through fields of sigils. Even language itself is symbolic machinery. Words like sin, salvation, heaven, hell, they are not descriptions but programs. To believe in sin is to enter contract. To believe in salvation is to enter obedience. The words trigger guilt, hope, fear currencies, harvested by the architecture. Every sermon is incantation, every sacred text a spellbook. Whether Bible, Quran, Vedas, or Sutras, each arranges symbols to shape perception, binding souls into cycles. Frio's warning was that scripture itself may be part of the farm, not liberation from it. Modernity has not escaped. Screens radiate symbols continuously. Logos appear thousands of times daily, each one designed with geometric precision to bypass reason. Circles, triangles, hidden eyes, spirals, and changent motifs repurposed for commerce. Social media feeds function as liturgies, endless scroll of images designed to evoke envy, desire, outrage. Each reaction is energy, harvested invisibly. The farm has no need for priests when algorithms perform the same function. To awaken to the language of symbols is terrifying because it strips the world of innocence. Every flag becomes sigil, every advertisement a ritual, every light a lure, but it also offers power. Once you see the symbols, you can refuse their command. You can stop feeding them, or even repurpose them. Just as magicians of old drew their own sigils to bend reality, the awakened can consecrate their own symbols, write their own scripts. The farm cannot be escaped, but its machinery can be hacked. This is why symbols are policed so fiercely. Heretics who draw forbidden signs, artists who subvert logos, mystics who reveal hidden meanings, they are silenced. Because the architecture depends on unbroken symbolic order. To reveal that the cross is a battery, the tunnel, a funnel, the logo, a sigil, is to threaten collapse. Symbols are the skeleton of the farm. If they fracture, the body weakens. So the next time you light a candle, kneel beneath a cross, pledge to a flag, or dream of a tunnel of light, ask yourself, what am I feeding? Who wrote this symbol? Who benefits when I obey it? The answer is never simple. The farm thrives precisely because symbols feel sacred, natural, inevitable. But once you see them as machinery, the world changes. You no longer walk in sanctuary, you walk in circuitry. And every circuit has a breaker, waiting to be flipped. The farm survives because it runs on blood. It's not only the crimson liquid that spills from veins, but every essence that bleeds from the human condition: grief, devotion, ecstasy, despair. Blood is not merely fluid. It is currency, the oldest medium of exchange between flesh and the forces beyond. From the earliest sacrifices on primitive altars to the silent harvesting of emotions in modern cathedrals and stadiums, blood has always been the coin paid to keep the system turning. In ancient ritual, the exchange was obvious. Animals were cut open on stone tables, their blood poured out to gods who demanded offerings. In some cultures, humans themselves became the gift, their screams echoing in temples, their final breaths framed as honor. These rites were not superstition, they were transactions. Life poured out was energy released, and the architecture of the farm absorbed it, feeding presences unseen. The priests told the people it pleased the gods. In truth, it fueled the machinery. The Book of Enoch described the Nephilim devouring everything livestock, crops, flesh. They were avatars of consumption, living metaphors for the harvest itself. Their hunger embodied the principle that nothing is free, that every gift from the Watchers carried a price written in blood. Metallurgy gave weapons, but weapons demanded slaughter. Astrology offered foresight, but foresight led to fear and control. Sorcery promised power, but power demanded isolation and madness. Every fragment of knowledge came with hidden debt, and that debt was collected in essence. The farm's brilliance is in how it evolved. Where once blood flowed in ritual slaughter, today it flows in subtler forms. Consider war. Soldiers die in millions, their bodies torn, their anguish poured into the earth. Politicians call it necessity, nations call it honor, but the architecture reads it as offering. Every battlefield is altar, every trench a chalice. The blood spilled is never wasted. It is consumed by the same currents that fed on sacrifices millennia ago. Or consider grief. When a mother weeps over her child's coffin, when a congregation gathers in mourning, the emotions radiate like incense. Every sob, every trembling hand, every whispered prayer is blood in another form life, force leaking through the heart instead of the veins. Funerals are ceremonies engineered to channel this currency. The candles, the bells, the chants, these are conduits that gather grief and deliver it upward. The mourners believe they honor the dead. In truth, they are feeding the farm. Even joy becomes blood. The ecstasy of crowds at concerts, the rapture of worshipers during revival, the frenzy of fans in stadiums all surge with energy, intensity indistinguishable from pain in the architecture's economy. To the system, devotion and despair are equally valuable, for both bleed essence. The farm is indifferent to polarity. Love and hate, joy and sorrow, hope and terror, each is harvestable. The more extreme, the richer the yield. This explains why the farm produces suffering so abundantly. War, poverty, betrayal, heartbreak, they are not accidents of flawed humanity, but crops cultivated for yield. Every heartbreak is a small bleed, every war a flood. The system needs blood not because it is cruel, but because it is hungry. Hunger is its law, and humanity is livestock bred to feed it. The afterlife itself is the final collection. Near-death experiencers describe tunnels of light, overwhelming love, reunions with family. But consider what these reports share. Emotional intensity so profound it empties the soul completely. The being who greets you, the life review that shames you, the embrace that overwhelms all strip you of resistance. You pour out every drop of essence willingly, believing you are entering heaven. The chute recycles you because you are emptied, harvested to the last. The Jesuit Salvador Freo warned that this cycle was perfected exploitation. Faith and hope, which religions frame as virtues, are in truth currencies. To hope is to bleed forward. To believe is to sign away essence. To kneel is to open veins, unseen but real. In this inversion, faith becomes the most efficient form of harvest blood that flows eternally, renewed every day without knife or blade. Modernity masks the process, but does not end it. Think of how media cycles manufacture outrage, grief, or awe. Each tragedy broadcast globally is not only story but harvest ritual. Millions cry, rage, disparage viewer, bleeding energy into the system. Think of entertainment designed to addict, to amplify emotions, to keep the crowd chanting, weeping, screaming. All of it is ritual slaughter, disguised as leisure. The farm has no need for temples when glowing screens extract blood more efficiently. Yet within this truth lies a choice. If blood is the oldest currency, then awakening means choosing how you spend it. You cannot stop bleeding it, is the condition of being alive. Every love, every grief, every hope drains essence. But you can decide whether to bleed blindly for the farm or consciously for yourself, your kin, your path. Ancient mystics spoke of sacrifice not as loss, but as offering to the self, a reclaiming of blood from the system. To consecrate your own tears, to dedicate your own pain, is to divert flow away from the farm and toward your sovereignty. Still, the architecture is relentless. It will demand payment until your last breath, and then again at death's threshold. This is why detachment is whispered in so many traditions, not as virtue, but as survival, to still the emotions, to quiet the hopes, to refuse the tunnel's embrace, is to deny the farm its harvest. Silence becomes rebellion, neutrality becomes weapon, refusal becomes liberation. So the next time you bleed in body and heart, and soul, ask yourself, who is collecting? To whom are you paying? Because the farm is patient, and its altars are everywhere, yet awareness is blade. To see the system is to hold knife at its throat. And once you know blood is currency, you can decide who deserves to drink it. The farm does not function on violence alone. Its true genius is contracts. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers did not tumble by accident. They gathered on Mount Hermon, swore oaths together, and bound themselves to a covenant so tight that not one could turn back without betraying the others. Their rebellion was not impulse, it was contract, signed in unity, sealed with consequence. That pattern repeats endlessly, for the system requires consent. You are not dragged, you are convinced. You are not chained. You are bound by your own agreement. Every prayer is a contract. When you kneel and whisper words to heaven, you are not simply expressing hope, you are authorizing transaction. You state your need, you surrender your will, you sign with faith. And the farm accepts, harvesting the energy of your devotion in exchange for a promise rarely fulfilled. Every baptism is a contract. Water is ink upon the soul, binding newborns into a covenant they never understood. Every confession is a contract, words of guilt transformed into signatures that renew allegiance. None of this feels coercive, yet each is legally binding in the architecture of the farm. The afterlife trap functions on the same logic. The tunnel of light does not force souls forward, it persuades. Loved ones appear, radiating warmth, urging you to step through. A life review shames you into compliance, convincing you to try again, to repay debt, to re-enter the cycle. This is not abduction, it is negotiation. It's by stepping forward, you sign another contract. Return to the farm, consent to harvest. The brilliance of the system is that it extracts consent even as it exploits. You are convinced that the contract is gift when it is cage. Even outside religion, contracts surround you. To take a job is to sign away hours of your life force in exchange for survival. To accept debt is to bind your future into servitude. To agree to terms of service on a glowing screen is to surrender privacy, attention, identity. Modern contracts are occult pacts dressed in corporate jargon. They function on the same principles: request, offering, agreement, consequence. Whether before altar or computer, you bind yourself and the farm feeds. This is why Freya warned that faith itself is the most dangerous contract. To believe without question is to sign blank pages, leaving the farm to write terms unseen. To trust wholly in salvation is to offer consent without conditions, to authorize endless recycling in exchange for comfort. Faith feels liberating because it requires no scrutiny, but precisely because it is blind, it is the perfect binding. No force is needed when the herd signs its own contracts willingly. Occult traditions expose the pattern clearly. Every grimoire insists that spirits must be summoned through pact. Name spoken, circle drawn, offering given, contract sealed. The magician believes he is in control, but the law is symmetrical. The spirit, too, receives consent to act. Once invited, it cannot be easily dismissed. Crowley's IUs dictated the book of the law as covenant, not vision. The 9 demanded obedience in exchange for answers. The Elohim of Raoul required devotion, new rituals, new temples. Each presented revelation as agreement. Pact delivered power, but bound the participants more tightly. The inversion is that what you think is holy covenant is in truth a contract of exploitation. Baptism is not blessing, but enrollment. Confession is not cleansing, but renewal of binding. Marriage vows, oaths of office, pledges of allegiance all function as pacts, feeding the architecture with your consent. The more sacred the ritual feels, the deeper the contract cuts. Yet within this structure lies a hidden opportunity. If every prayer is contract, then silence is refusal. Every belief is consent, then doubt is rebellion. To stop signing does not dismantle the farm, but it weakens its hold on you. This is why mystics across ages whispered of detachment, of neutrality, of stillness. They were not merely preaching virtue, they were teaching escape. To withdraw consent is to step outside contract, to exist without binding. If you achieve it, for the system surrounds with endless opportunities to sign again. But those who succeed become anomalies, souls no longer recycled, beings unbound. The farm fears such anomalies. Heretics, apostates, skeptics, they threaten the machinery not by violence, but by non-consent. That is why they are demonized, silenced, burned. The architecture cannot tolerate refusal, for refusal breaks the contract. The herd must be convinced that to doubt is sin, to resist is damnation. This is why every religion equates disbelief with punishment. It is not divine wrath, it is contract enforcement. To keep the farm running, dissent must be framed as fatal. So ask yourself, how many contracts have you already signed? The oath at school, the pledge to a flag, the prayers you whispered as child, the promises made to gods you barely understood. Each signature lingers, each vow echoes, each contract binds. Awakening begins by seeing them for what they are. Not sacred, not inevitable, but agreements. And once you recognize them, you can choose differently. You can tear the pages, refuse the signatures, decline the light. You can draft your own covenant not with gods, not with farmers, but with yourself. The system thrives on contracts. But every system has loopholes. And perhaps the most forbidden knowledge of all is this: you do not have to keep signing. The most unsettling feature of the biospiritual farm is not its rituals, not even its contracts, but its inversion of morality. Everything you were taught to cherish, faith, suffering, hope, obedience, may in truth be the very mechanisms that keep you bound. What religions frame as sacred virtues, the farm reframes as harvest protocols. What you thought would free you has been engineered to enslave you. Faith, for example, is exalted as the highest virtue. To believe without evidence, to trust without question, is praised across traditions as the key to salvation. Yet in the farm, faith is the most efficient form of consent. To believe blindly is to sign the contract without reading the terms. To kneel with certainty is to open your veins willingly. Faith does not liberate, it binds. The more fervent the believer, the stronger the chain. The inversion is complete. The very act meant to free the soul is the signature that keeps it recycled. Suffering is another inversion. Religion tells you suffering ennobles, that trials purify, that pain is a test rewarded in eternity. But in the farm, suffering is not test, but product. Pain radiates energy. Grief pours essence. Every heartbreak, every loss, every torment is harvested. The more you endure, the more the system feeds. To convince humanity that suffering is holy is to guarantee endless supply. Wars, plagues, betrayals, all are not anomalies but crops. And the faithful embrace their agony, believing it sanctifies, never realizing it fattens the harvest. Hope is perhaps the cruelest inversion. Hope is marketed as light in darkness, as salvation waiting just beyond the veil. But what is hope if not perpetual deferral? You suffer today, but hope tells you tomorrow will redeem. You bleed now, but hope whispers heaven will restore. In the farm, hope is fuel, a renewable resource that ensures compliance. As long as you hope, you endure. As long as you endure, you feed. The tunnel of light is the ultimate symbol of hope, welcoming, promising rest. Yet it is the recycling chute, the final harvest disguised as embrace. Hope is not your ally, it's your leash. Obedience completes the inverted moral code. From childhood you are told to obey parents, priests, rulers, gods. Obedience is framed as virtue, disobedience is sin. But obedience is simply compliance with architecture. Obey is to walk into rituals, sign contracts, kneel beneath symbols without question. To rebel is to fracture the system. That is why rebellion is demonized, why Lucifer is framed as adversary, why heresy is punished with fire. Obedience is not holy, it is harvest. Disobedience is not damnation, it is sovereignty. The moral code is inverted so completely that to break free you must embrace what you were taught to fear. The afterlife reflects this inversion most starkly, as you are told that death is liberation, that heaven awaits the faithful, that judgment ensures justice. But the tunnel of light reveals another reality. You are greeted, comforted, reviewed not for your freedom, but for your compliance. Did you obey? Did you suffer well? Did you feed the farm faithfully? If yes, you are recycled. If no, you are punished. Frightened back into obedience next cycle. What looks like reward and punishment is nothing but containment logic, designed to keep you circling forever. Salvador Freo understood this. His testimony spoke of the great inversion, that the values exalted in seminaries were the very mechanisms of enslavement. Faith, suffering, hope, obedience, all praised as sacred, all revealed as traps. He warned that humanity must see the inversion or remain livestock forever. For this, he was silenced. Institutions cannot allow the herd to see that their moral code is not divine, but engineered. If people recognize that their deepest virtues are harvesting tools, the architecture would collapse overnight. Yet the inversion holds power because it feels so deeply true. Faith does comfort, hope does soothe, obedience does protect, suffering does carve depth into the soul. These experiences are real, visceral, undeniable. That is why the system is genius. It harvests not by crushing truth, but by twisting it. Faith becomes blindness, hope becomes leash, suffering becomes crop, obedience becomes cage. Each inversion harnesses real human experience and repurposes it as fuel. That is why the farm endures. It feeds not on lies, but on truths inverted. For the awakened, the task is not to abandon morality, but to see through its inversion, to realize that rebellion is not evil, but necessary. That detachment is not apathy, but weapon. That neutrality is not emptiness, but refusal to bleed. The true path is not obedience, but authorship. To write your own code, to consecrate your own values, to refuse those handed down by farmers disguised as gods. This is not easy, it is terrifying. It means standing against every authority, every tradition, every comfort. It means walking without faith, without hope, without obedience, into the raw silence of sovereignty. But consider the alternative. Endless cycles of harvest, lifetime after lifetime of suffering, framed as sacred. The inversion ensures compliance until death, and then beyond. Only by breaking the code can the cycle be broken. That is why awakening is rare, and why those who speak of it are silenced. Heretics, mystics, rebels, they are not damned. They are anomalies who saw the farm for what it is and refused to play. So ask yourself, what if everything you were taught as virtue was engineered as trap? What if every act of faith, every prayer of hope, every obedient gesture was another signature on your harvest contract? Can you dare to embrace what you were taught to fear: rebellion, doubt, detachment as the true path of freedom? The inverted moral code leaves no comfort, only choice. And that choice is the doorway. to remain livestock or to walk into sovereignty, no matter how dark the path may seem. If the farm is real, then ritual is its machinery. It does not require secret temples or hooded priests. It thrives in plain sight, dressed as culture, tradition, entertainment, even therapy. Rituals are everywhere, engineered to keep humanity feeding the architecture. Once seen, the world transforms. No longer neutral, but a vast liturgy in motion. A theater of harvest where every gesture, every chant, every symbol channels energy. Consider the cathedral. High ceilings, colored light refracting through stained glass, incense curling upward, choirs raising their voices in unison. To the faithful, it is beauty. To the farm, it is circuitry. The architecture funnels emotion like electricity through wires. Joy, grief, devotion, all transmitted upward, harvested through repetition. The congregation believes they are worshiping. In truth, they are performing ritual designed to drain. But step outside religion, and the pattern continues. A political rally mirrors the same choreography. Flags wave like sacred icons. Anthems swell like hymns. Hands raise in unison. Crowds chant slogans until individuality dissolves. The leader takes the pulpit, bathed in light, adored as Messiah. The emotions are identical devotion. Oh, ecstasy, and so is the harvest. The farm does not care whether you kneel to cross or flag, altar or podium. Both are rituals. Both bleed energy. Entertainment, too, functions as ritual. Stadium packed with fans chanting lyrics in unison. Lights glowing like candles. Bodies swaying as wine aid is mass ceremony. Indistinguishable from revival. Concerts create ecstasy, and ecstasy is harvest. Even in sports, ritual dominates. The anthem before the game, the roar of the crowd, the shared ecstasy of victory or despair of defeat, all produce emotional surges ripe for collection. The ball is irrelevant. The ritual is the point. Media cycles operate as daily liturgy. Outrage over disasters, tears for victims, fear of looming crisis, all orchestrated and broadcast into millions of homes. Each viewer participates unconsciously, their emotions stirred and drained, their energy siphoned upward. The farm no longer needs priests. Algorithms now serve as ritual masters, ensuring constant engagement, constant bleeding. Every click, every scroll, every reaction is a miniature ritual, repeated billions of times daily. Even in private life, rituals abound. Funerals with candles and prayers, weddings with vows and rings, birthdays with candles blown out, and wishes made all framed as tradition, yet each charged with symbolic resonance. The energy of collective focus, the binding of vows, the offering of hope all are harvestable. No moment is too small, no gesture too innocent. The farm thrives because it has turned life itself into endless ritual. The danger is invisibility. Because rituals feel natural, they are rarely questioned. Who would suspect that singing happy birthday is symbolic programming? Who would doubt that waving a flag is invocation? Who would imagine that tears shed at a funeral are harvested currency? Yet once you see the structure, the disguise collapses. Rituals are everywhere, and their ubiquity is proof of the farm's reach. Salvador Freo spoke of this omnipresence. As Jesuit, he recognized that ritual was not confined to liturgy, but infused into every layer of existence. He warned that the system required constant performance, that every human action had been reframed as offering. He saw the continuity between prayer in chapel, chant in rally, scream in stadium, and scroll on glowing screen. To him, all were liturgies of the same farm. His words were dismissed as madness, but they echo with unsettling accuracy in a world saturated with ritual disguised as normality. Awakening to this truth breeds unease. Suddenly, you see ritual in every corner. A courtroom where oaths bind like spells. A therapy session where repetition reprograms. A classroom where recitations indoctrinate. The veil lifts, and nothing appears neutral again. You realize you were never outside ritual, were born into it, conditioned by it, consumed within it. Ritual is the air you breathe, the script you recite unconsciously, the invisible chain that makes harvest seamless. But recognition also brings agency. If rituals are everywhere, then you can choose which to empower. You can refuse those that drain and consecrate those that strengthen. You can redirect your energy instead of bleeding it blindly. Magicians of old knew this. They drew their own sigils, wrote their own chants, authored their own rituals to resist the imposed liturgy. They understood that ritual is inevitable, but authorship is possible. The farm thrives on unconscious repetition, weakens under conscious rewriting. Still, the farm resists fiercely. Those who break ritual are punished, apostates are shunned, heretics burned, rebels silenced. Even today, refusing to stand for anthem, refusing to vote, refusing to kneel at altar, refusing to perform expected gestures, invites scorn, isolation, or worse. The farm enforces ritual conformity through social pressure, proving how deeply harvest depends on participation. Ritual everywhere means resistance. Everywhere must be costly, yet the cracks widen. As more awaken, rituals lose their power, ants falter, attendance declines, faith erodes. The architecture shakes, not because rituals vanish, but because their performers see through them. A ritual loses potency when its participants awaken. The words no longer bind, the symbols no longer command, the harvest no longer flows. The farm fears this more than rebellion, because rebellion still bleeds. Awakening dries the stream. So the question becomes, how many rituals are you still performing unconsciously? How many times have you signed your essence away with a gesture you thought innocent? How many times have you fed the farm with your grief, your joy, your devotion? To see rituals everywhere is unsettling, but it is first step to freedom. For only when you see the machinery can you decide whether to keep fueling it or to step out of the liturgy and into sovereignty. Awakening to the system is not like opening a window. It is like waking from a dream only to discover you are still inside another dream, layers upon layers of programming. The first instinct is denial. Surely earth is not farm. Surely faith is not trap. Surely love and hope cannot be bait. But the evidence will not let you rest. The architecture is too consistent, the rituals too universal, the symbols too precise. Slowly, uneasily, you begin to see. You were never free. You were livestock, dressed in illusions of choice. The shock of awakening comes in fragments. A funeral no longer feels sacred, but like ceremony engineered to drain grief. A national anthem stops stirring pride and instead vibrates like incantation. The tunnel of light, once comforting in near-death tales, now looks like a recycling chute. The same experiences remain, but their meanings invert. The comfort collapses, and behind it lies machinery. You are not praising, you are consenting. You were not grieving, you were feeding. You were not loving, you were bleeding. With this recognition comes terror. If the farm is everywhere, then what part of your life has not been harvested? Every prayer, every hope, every heartbreak, offerings, every oath, every ritual, every symbol contracts. To awaken is to see your biography rewritten as ledger of transactions. You thought you lived. In truth, you were harvested. This realization crushes many, and they retreat into denial, preferring illusion to abyss. That too is part of the system doubt contained by fear. But those who endure discover something else. Awareness itself changes the equation. The farm thrives on unconscious consent. Once you see, consent becomes fragile. The prayer loses its grip. The symbol loses its command. The ritual loses its potency. You may still perform them, but with awareness, the energy no longer flows in the same way. The spell fractures. Ash! This is the first weapon of awakening. Not escape, but disruption. To know the trap is to weaken it. Salvador Frio spoke of this rebellion. Detachment. Not indifference, but refusal. By refusing to bleed emotions into rituals, by staying neutral when provoked to fear or ecstasy, the awakened withhold currency. Silence becomes resistance. Stillness becomes rebellion. To feel without feeding, to live without consenting, is to starve the farm. This path is narrow, for the architecture bombards you constantly with stimuli, tragedy, hope, outrage, joy. To not feed requires vigilance, clarity, discipline. It is war fought not with weapons, but with awareness. Awakening also reveals paradox. You realize you cannot leave the farm by physical escape. There are no fences to cross, no ships to board. The farm is not land, but system. Not cage, but ritual. Escape must happen in consciousness. This is why mystics across traditions whispered the same forbidden truth. Stop feeding. Do not rush toward the light. Do not sign contracts of faith. Do not surrender your essence to rituals disguised as salvation. Stand still. Refuse. Only then can the cycle weaken. And yet the risk is immense. To detach from rituals is to detach from society itself. You stop kneeling when others kneel, chanting when others chant, weeping when others weep. You become anomaly, heretic, exile. The herd rejects anomalies because they threaten the ritual order. Awakening, therefore, isolates. But isolation is also protection, better exile than livestock, better anomaly than harvest. The deeper you awaken, the more you see patterns extending beyond Earth. Myths of other worlds, other cycles, other harvests suggest that the farm is not local, but cosmic. Earth may be one of many enclosures, each engineered for harvest. This possibility brings despair to some, but liberation to others. If the farm is vast, then awakening is universal rebellion. Each soul that sees the system fractures its grip, not just here, but everywhere. One anomaly becomes contagion. One awakened spark ignites others. So awakening is not comfortable enlightenment. It is shattering clarity, raw and merciless. It strips away innocence, demolishes binaries, forces you to stand without scaffolding of faith or hope. But in that nakedness lies sovereignty. For the first time, you are not signing blindly. You are not consenting unconsciously. You are not feeding without knowing. Awareness may not dismantle the farm overnight, but it denies it monopoly. And denial multiplied becomes rupture. To awaken is to step into unbearable freedom. No promises of heaven, no comfort of salvation, no soothing illusions of purpose, only the stark choice. Feed the farm or refuse, consent or silence, contract or sovereignty. It is choice made in every thought, every breath, every death. And in that choice, the system trembles. So you must ask, if Earth is a farm, if rituals are everywhere, if contracts bind every soul, will you continue feeding, or will you dare the impossible and refuse? Will you step into the tunnel of light smiling at illusions, or will you turn away into silence, risking the unknown? Awakening is not answer but question, and the question is carved in fire. Who will you serve, the farmers or yourself? The farm feeds because most never see it. But once you glimpse the machinery, innocence is gone. If Earth is truly a harvest ground, then every breath is contract, every prayer is payment. So ask yourself, will you keep feeding the system, or dare to break the ritual? Subscribe and descend deeper.